Hello everybody, hope you're doing okay. Now the Nike Zoom Fly 6 here, let's cut to the chase. I think this is my favourite shoe that I bought this year. Now why is that? Well, for a start, it's not the brick that the Zoom Fly 3 and Zoom Fly 5 were. They really were absolutely awful, I have to say, even for a Nike fan. The Zoom Fly 6 I found very versatile. I've already done 53 miles in them, and I've done a park run where I put some effort in on a hilly one. I've done 2 interval sessions and 2 long runs, 11 miles each, and a couple of steady runs. And so I've gotten all paces from 5-minute miling, sort of virtual sprinting, down to sort of an easy, almost 9-minute mile pace. So yeah, very versatile, I would say. For somebody with a long narrow foot, it fits me surprisingly well. I haven't had to tie in the laces anywhere near as much as I do normally, although there is nice room in the toe box here. It does run perhaps very, very slightly short, but I think it's sort of like stretched out a bit over time, and I'm not really finding that an issue anymore. The ride is that excellent compromise between being sort of a fairly soft shoe but also very, very responsive, and I think the carbon plate helps there a lot. Also, having had Achilles issues for most of this year, I'm finding this shoe surprisingly stable. Now I don't think it's really marketed as a stability shoe, but I think the combination of the plate and the fact that the foam isn't too sort of soft really does feel like I've got a like nice supportive element. And also the heel flare at the back here is nice and flared out, and it doesn't aggravate my Achilles anywhere near as much as some other shoes do. It's also fairly light for what might be described as a super trainer. In my size it's 336 grams, which sounds a lot, but don't forget I've got UK 13, and that's almost identical weight to the Pegasus Plus, which itself is about 30 grams less than the Pegasus 41. So you get an idea there that it's definitely a lighter shoe than a standard daily trainer for sure, and I think in the standard size it's about 250, which I can only really get in my Vaporfly 3s as a sort of road modern shoe, as it were. Speaking of the Peg Plus, this has an 8mm drop, exactly the same as the Peg Plus, but I feel like the drop in this one feels a bit more than it actually is in the Peg Plus, because that's a bit softer with no plate. This feels like a very supportive shoe, and also feels like you've got a nice platform to run on, but not in a sort of constricting way. And with 42mm at the back here, it's technically illegal for racing, 34 at the front, so that means it's a shoe that isn't really having too much ground fill. If I want some ground fill, I reach for the Pegasus 41 and Pegasus Plus. Now, not to say that lack of ground fill or having ground fill is good or bad. Just in this shoe, it's just set up for having a higher stack, and you certainly do appreciate that some days, and other days I feel like I like to have a bit of ground fill, work my legs a bit more. Or perhaps the most important feature that is worth noting, it has a gusseted tongue, so that surely means that it must be a good shoe, mustn't it? So let's dive into the shoe a bit more. It's a 2-layered setup here. We've actually got ZoomX, and when it says ZoomX, the ZoomX is actually not there, it's actually at the top. And the ZoomX, where it says ZoomX, is actually the SR2 foam, which is like an EVO foam, but it just provides a bit more stability, and that means you basically are sitting on top of the ZoomX and you've got the plate in the middle. I do find actually that this sort of foam here, although people say it's only EVA, it does feel fairly soft, and out of the box it did feel very, very soft, although I did notice the plate straight away, but I think over time I've got used to it, and now I do feel like I can feel this plate quite a lot. Some people say this is a really sort of bendy shoe, but I don't know whether it's just the fact in my UK 13 the plates have to be stiffer, but I'm not trying to bend this too much, but it's not really flexing too much at all there. If I compare that to the Vaporfly 3, perhaps it's just not quite as stiff, but I'm still been able to bend that as well, just a bit. So this is the Eliud Kipchoge colourway. This actually cost £10 more, but I had a 20% loyalty voucher from Nike, so I was able to sort of have a net gain of £10. So I got this for basically £154, and it's got Eliud Kipchoge's signature there, and it says, "It's just the start." And I do like this colourway. I took it out today and it was very wet and very cold, and performed really well in terms of like the outsole grip. It's the typical sort of Nike waffly bit of the cutaway in the middle here, which you might think is a bit of a magnet for rocks. Haven't found that too much of a problem so far. And as you can see, I'll clean these up for Ben Notley. They used to have a bit of mud on the heels, but I've managed to get rid of that quite nicely. In terms of the tongue, as well as being gusseted, it's got a nice bit of padding here, which I think helps with the lockdown. So it's not too padded, but it's just nicely padded. It takes away all the pressure from the laces. And the setup here, I found like quite nice to be able to get a nice lockdown. And it's one of the few shoes that I felt like I haven't had to pull in the laces an awful lot. You can see here, I haven't got a huge amount of excess lacing, but that's largely because I haven't had to pull it in too much. Initially I thought that the front of it looked rather wide, a bit like a sort of reminiscent of the Streak Fly, but I think in a way I do like that. I find my feet are most narrowest across the midfoot here, so I like a bit more extra room. I did initially feel that it was just maybe slightly short, maybe by a sort of quarter of a size. But I think over time I've got used to it, and I think having tied the laces just a bit tighter here, just to make sure I've got a good lockdown, I'm not feeling any problems here. When I take my socks off, I don't get any black toes, so I think in that sense it's the right size. So if you're right on the edge between two sizes, then I think, yeah, you may just want to be slightly careful there. I think also if you've got a very wide foot, then you may find this a bit too narrow. What I thought was interesting though, if I compare this to the Vaporfly 3, the Vaporfly 3 has actually got a thinner outsole, and you can just visually see that, but it actually sort of, to me, it fits a lot wider. I think that's partly because of the fact that the material is so much thinner here, and the tongue isn't quite so padded as you'd expect from a racing shoe. But I think, if anything, people say, oh, is this the training companion of the Alphafly or the Vaporfly? Well, to me, this feels more like a Vaporfly than the Alphafly. I didn't really get on with the Alphafly, whereas I'm getting on with these. So that, in a way, sort of speaks a lot, doesn't it? And the Vaporfly 3, although it's perhaps not my favourite, the Vaporfly, I think the Vaporfly 1 is still my favourite. Then I still have had some good runs in this, and I found this as sort of a fast shoe. It does have that slightly softer feeling than the original ones. I think just got a bit more ZoomX, and they've made the outsole thinner as well. In this one, again, it's sort of, you'd feel like it's a bit heavier. It's 336 grams compared to 255, so that's quite a lot, and just picking them up, you do feel a difference, but it certainly doesn't feel a heavy shoe on foot. And I've done sessions in this when I'm doing basically 5k pace, 10k pace, and I did a few 30-second sprints when I was getting down to low 5-minute miling. I also did a part run in 21 minutes on a hilly course. So I'm coming back from injury, so I think for me that was a decent effort on that particular day. So yeah, I think it's probably the heaviest shoe that I've ever taken into a competitive effort, and I thought, well, maybe that's just a sign of the times, but in that sense I thought it worked really well. And someone came past me in the race and said, have you got Alphaflies on? So I was able to just about mutter, no, these are Zoom flies. So I think if I'd have said I have a Zoomfly 5 on or a Zoomfly 3 on, he might have looked at me as if I'm daft. But yeah, in that sense, it certainly worked well. The insole is glued down, so if you've got orthotics or need that, then that could be an issue. But at the moment, sometimes I wear in my Pegasus like an insole with more arch support. I didn't really feel I needed to in this one. I think principally because of the fact that I'm using this for a shoe to go a bit faster when I feel like I need a bit more like how the shoe actually is, rather than putting heavy inserts in it. But yeah, certainly the Achilles helps. I did find on the long runs, when I was sort of going past an hour, because I haven't been doing too many long runs recently, that was starting to get a few issues, but I think that was more me than the shoe. And I think certainly for a long run shoe or a session shoe, when you don't want to use your best shoes like your Vaporflies, this is a great option. And today I took it out, and when it was really, really wet weather, and I was thinking I was going to completely ruin these shoes, but other than a quick flash wipe, then no, they've sort of like retained their whiteness quite well. And I think perhaps the higher stack sort of lifts you above the road a bit. So when I was going through some puddles, you've got a bit of stack to actually make sure you don't get too wet there. And they say it's like a dual mesh at the front. I'm never quite sure what that means, but I mean, to me, it's got rather cold now in the UK, so it feels breathable enough, and I didn't really get wet feet at all, as I said. So I wouldn't say it's waterproof, but it's certainly sort of like splash proof at the very best. And as long as you didn't put your foot straight in a big puddle, which I managed to avoid, it was okay. And there was quite a lot of wet leaves around as well, so I was being a bit careful going through them, but at no time did I feel like I was having any slipping. The heel canter is quite structured and quite firm. If you compare that to the Vaporfly 3s, which is sort of more of a cardboard, you can press that right in. So there's definitely more to it there. So again, it sort of emphasises the fact that this is more of a trainer than an actual race shoe. But I think, as I've demonstrated from the part run, if you wanted a shoe that's a bit more protective than the Vaporfly or something like that, then this is definitely a good one to have. And although it's heavier, I didn't really sort of feel that it was actually weighing me down, as it were, like some other shoes. In terms of comparing this to other shoes that I've had, well, I think the obvious comparison to me is with the Speed 4, the Endorphin Speed 4 that is. And I think, in a way, I think actually now I much prefer this. I think I prefer the fact that this is like just slightly stiffer shoe because of the fact you've got the carbon plate in it. I prefer the fact that the actual Achilles flare is better. The Speed, when I wore it the other week, it just felt a bit sort of ordinary now. I mean, it's always been a very good shoe, and I've always said that all the versions of the Speed are all pretty much the same. I did a video, if you remember, when I compared the Speed 1 and the Speed 4, and I did basically exactly the same times in both shoes. So yeah, in terms of like my ability to run fast or relatively fast, it was similar. But yeah, I think now I'd say that I actually prefer this to the Speed 4. And I think I do prefer it to the Pegasus Plus. I think just with the fact it's just a bit more protective to me at the moment. And the Pegasus Plus is a nice fun shoe. And it's the sort of shoe that you feel like you're working hard in. Whereas this one feels like you've got a nice shoe already on your foot and you've got the plate, it just feels supportive, it feels fast, it feels like you can do versatile things. Where the Peg Plus feels it's a bit more of a one-trick pony for sort of runs where you feel like you want to sort of like put a bit more work in yourself, almost like you feel like you're needing to sort of put more effort into it. Whereas this one, with the same sort of weight, yeah, I just feel like it's sort of helping him along a bit more. Now people always say, oh, every shoe needs to be compared to the Superblast. Well, unfortunately, Asics don't do my size in the Superblast. And they say, oh, we need to compare this to the Novablast 5. Well, that's not out yet. And the Novablast 5, well, it's probably about the best shoe that Asics offer me. So I'm not sure they're going to get that one. I get the feeling that's quite a soft shoe. And I think this one, definitely for me, it was going to be the better bet for sure. I think the Novablast 5 is going to be quite a relatively wide shoe, certainly wider than this one. So in that sense, another sort of red flag for me, definitely. They also say, is it going to be better than the Evo SL? Well, if you can get your hands on one, I'm sure it's going to be great. Is it going to be better than the SL2? Well, it's more expensive for sure. The SL2 I found was okay. Didn't find that sort of too much structure to it. So I found that I was sort of wobbling a bit, and it's a nice, light, cheap shoe, but I felt like I needed a bit more stability. And I think the plate in this and the Achilles flare gives me that, what I'm really wanting at the moment. So yeah, I think of all of those ones, I'm thinking this is the best for me. Whether it's best for you, of course, is completely different. Anyway, so is this a shoe that's on your radar, as it were? I think if it isn't, I certainly want to go and check it out. And I think at the moment, Nike have got a 25% off deal. I'm not quite sure whether that applies to the Zoomfly 6. So if it does, there might be a good opportunity to go and pick up one. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. Like and subscribe with that, and see you next one then. Bye.